I was 14 when I first saw my apparition. It was my grandfather. Almost 2 years later, I saw my second apparition, and it was my last. It was an early morning late in January when I was awakened by cold air on my face. There's nothing unusual about cold air when it was January in Pennsylvania, especially back when half the homes were still heated with coal. As I struggled to open my eyes, I remember thinking, this isn't a draft. Someone is breathing on me. What I saw when I opened my eyes terrified me and still gives me chills when I'm alone late at night. There, in the sparse light of a winter's dawn, I opened my eyes to see a black-robed, hooded figure leaning over me. I couldn't distinguish a face, but truthfully, I didn't want to. I was absolutely paralyzed. After what seemed hours, I finally was able to move enough to do the only thing I could have thought to do: pull the covers over my head. That is how I awoke several hours later. I remember noticing my bed was nowhere near any windows, which would have explained the concentration of cold air. I was, and still am certain it wasn't a dream. The whole experience shook me so much that for months every night before I fell asleep, I'd pray that I'd never see that or any other supernatural being again, which I haven't. I didn't talk about it until I mentioned it to my sister-in-law a month later. She believed in the supernatural, and I knew that she wouldn't laugh at me. I thought that she'd tell me that I probably had dreamt it, but after I'd finished, she looked at me thoughtfully and said she had seen the figure shortly before her mother died. Then she quickly added not to worry about it. 2 months later, my father died of cardiac arrest. At that time, the illustration of the Grim Reaper wasn't as popular as it is today. As a matter of fact, it was several years later when I saw a depiction on TV that I realized that was the figure I saw. Almost 20 years later, my teenage daughter and her friend were on their way upstairs, not the house of my early morning visitor, when suddenly my daughter called me. Judging from the urgency in her voice, I knew something was wrong. Her friend stood at the top of our open staircase, staring down in horror. The story was, as she followed my daughter to her room, she felt compelled to look behind her. She claimed that halfway down the stairs was a black-robed, hooded figure with no visible face, leaning on the outside banister, its head on its arms as though grieving. Hiding my panic, I tried to calm her. After she went home, I questioned my daughter whether she had told her friend about my experience. She swore up and down she hadn't, and I know I had never told the girl. Less than a week later, her grandmother died. Whatever it is, I don't care to see it again. As I said, that was the last thing I've seen, but, and this will get a big laugh, I've heard voices and unexplainable noises. But that's another story. Thanks for reading. This is a true story that my mother told me a long time ago, and is one she would like to forget. My mom and a couple of my aunts decided to take a well-deserved, or so they say, holiday, and arranged to stay in a supposedly beautiful cottage. But when they arrived, they knew something was wrong. It was as if the house was the very definition of gloom. The old building towered in front of them, giving off a sense of darkness despite the warm, sunny summer day. No one spoke, all stunned. My mom led the way inside, the beginning of a day of terror. Later that day, one of my aunts came in after a shopping trip to the local village when she looked a little bewildered. She said that the local people had ignored her when they heard where they were staying, except for one woman who had begged them to leave the house. There was one bedroom in the house that led the way to the bathroom, so like it or not, everyone had to pass through it to get to the toilet. When my mom went into the room, the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and right from the second the door was opened, she could feel the coldness of the room, more like an uneasiness lingering in the air, but showing itself by chilling the bedroom. Everyone was scared and decided to leave the next morning. That night, as silence once again filled the cottage and the lights were turned off, one of my aunts began to scream as her bed began to shake violently and would lift up and slam down. It stopped suddenly. Everyone had decided not to sleep in the room that led to the bathroom, so it seemed that it wasn't the only bedroom that was haunted. They all got ready as quick as they could and left in the early hours of the morning. It was a very frightening experience for those who were in the house that day. Thanks for reading. I work at a major museum in the Midwest, and I always thought that my dream job would be to work there because I always enjoyed learning the history behind it. It is a very large museum, and it is certainly great to meet all the different visitors that we get, but it's an unwritten law that we can never discuss anything that may happen to us because it would take away the purpose of the visit there. It was a very slow morning in January, and I was all alone in the building reading to myself and trying not to fall asleep when I heard footsteps above my head. There is only one set of stairs that led to the second floor, and I was sitting next to the padlocked door. I started to try not to run screaming out of the building and to start breathing again when they suddenly stopped. I shook the padlock, certain that it was locked, and I decided that it was time to relax by the front of the store, my common escape. As I stood on the steps, I started to relax a little, and by then, more people were entering the village, so I forgot the incident and told scads of people about the building who worked in it, etc. When around noon, as I was locking up for lunch, I heard them running up and down the stairs behind the door again. This time I just slammed the door and ran next to the other building I was relieving the workers in. I didn't think that the footsteps would follow me. I mean, it is a completely separate building in a different time period. I was wrong. I told the ladies in the other building that they had an hour break, and then I described what had happened to me. They spent the next 20 minutes trying to coax anything that may have haunted the building to appear so they could see it themselves. Well, nothing happened. I was extremely freaked out, and then they went to lunch. As expected, nothing happened for another few minutes, and just as the adrenaline in my body was settled down to normal, I heard them again. All I could think was, they're here. So now, I was sitting across from another set of stairs that again led to the second floor of the house, but these stairs had a velvet rope across them because of fire codes, so no one could go upstairs. So, I'm staring at these inaccessible stairs, watching the window curtains sway. There's no heat in any of these buildings, so it couldn't have been a register or a door. They were all closed. I felt as if I were going to have a heart attack and die. I started to feel faint from fear when a family came in and asked me to show them the house. I did, and they quickly left, but I did have enough presence of mind to notice that when they were in the house, the curtains stopped swaying and the footsteps stopped. I also had asked if anyone in the groups had had a child escape and run upstairs. Every group said no, but I just couldn't believe what was going on. Needless to say, I spent a majority of my time that day on the porch of the home, waiting anxiously for the other employees to come back so I could leave. I don't work in that division of the museum anymore, but I did work those buildings several more times, and the footsteps never happened again. I wonder why they decided to on that particular day. This story did not happen to me. It happened to my mother. I did check with her and verify the details, so it is accurate. Unfortunately, I must be a little vague about the details of time, place, and names in order to honor a promise made by my parents at the time these events occurred. When I was an infant, my parents lived in the same mid-sized, Midwestern town they had both been born in. They had a circle of friends they had known collectively and respectively for years. Part of that group was my dad's best high school friend, whom I will call Bill. My dad and Bill were very close, and to this day, my dad gets a little quiet when his name comes up. Bill was unmarried and had been dating a woman, let's call her Lillian, who was not very popular with his friends or family. She was considered sorta crazy, neurotic, given to fits of rage and wild behavior. Bill and Lillian were pretty much in the outs as a couple, but were at that ending stage of their relationship where they still got together occasionally, usually resulting in a fight. One night, Bill and Lillian went out and ended up having an argument. She was driving the car they were in, and due to her anger, she was driving way too fast and had an accident. While she was relatively unharmed, Bill was thrown from the car and killed. Here's the part about the promise made by my parents. Bill had some medical tests done a day or so before he died. The lab results didn't come back until after his death, and they revealed that Bill had kidney cancer. It was unlikely he would have had a long or healthy life. His parents made everyone promise they would never reveal this to Lillian, however, because they never wanted her to feel guiltiness about causing the accident that killed their son. They considered her crazy enough that she might decide she'd done him and everyone else a favor and absolve herself of any responsibility. And now, here comes the ghost part. A day or so before his funeral, she got off an elevator in an office building, the old-fashioned one that still had an operator, and turned around to see him standing in the back of the elevator. He just stared, without expression, she said, and then the doors closed. My mom said she was sorta shocked, but still went about her business. A couple of weeks later, she saw him in a car next to hers at a red light. She said she looked over and he was sitting in the back seat with several other occupants of that car who seemed to be entirely unaware of their extra passenger, and she could see right through him to the other people in the seat. But the most touching and personal episode occurred early one morning, about a month after Bill's death. My father had already left for work, and the baby, me, had been fed and had gone back to sleep. My mom was taking advantage of the quiet time to read in bed. Suddenly, she looked up, and Bill was standing in the door of her bedroom, and again, she could see through him. There was no mistaking who it was, though. My mom sort of started and said, "Bill," in a kind of wondering way. He reached out his hand to her and said, although not out loud, she just heard his voice in her head, "I'll miss you. I'll miss you all." Then he kind of gave a wistful, rueful smile and sort of shrugged and disappeared. Not gradually, nor did he walk away, just 1 minute there and 1 minute not. She walked over to where he had been and stood there, and while it was not cold or warmer, she said it felt different. She was not in the slightest bit frightened, just sad about the way things had turned out. This was the last sighting she had of Bill. We hope he knows how much my father cared for him. My name is Daniel, and I'm 15 years old. I was born and raised in Maryland, but we moved to Kentucky 2 years ago. This story is about when my mom and I went to visit my 20-year-old sister in Baltimore. She had a roommate, and 4 kids lived there. My sister's daughter, her roommate's 2 daughters, and my other sister. We arrived late at night, around 9 p.m., and on the way, everyone was trying to convince me and my mom that the house was haunted. Well, I believe in the paranormal, but it takes a lot to frighten me. Well, that night, we were all playing around and I fell asleep on the couch downstairs, while everyone else was upstairs. My sister and their roommates were late birds. They never went to sleep till 3 a.m. While I was sleeping, something woke me up by tugging on my sheets. I thought it was my sister playing a joke on me, but when I woke up, no one was there. This didn't really bother me, so I went back to sleep. In the morning, my sister's 11-year-old roommate woke me up because she was going to school. I asked her why they tried to wake me up last night, and she insisted they didn't. The day passed by very fast, and it was around 7 p.m. when they decided to tell us the story of what had been happening. As it turned out, a guy across the street told them the house had been a butcher's place, but the butcher was a very mean person, and everyone believed he killed people. Nobody knew his name, they just called him the Man. They told me my 2-year-old niece was the first to see the man one day while Sandy, my sister, was cleaning up. My niece had just told someone to leave her alone, and my sister turned around to see who she was talking to, but no one was even near her. Still, my niece kept saying "go away" and "leave me alone" to the wind. Another incident happened when my niece told her mommy that the man had hit her. This might have not seemed real, but when my niece showed my sister her back, my sister found teeth and hand marks on her. This freaked my sister out, but that's not the end of the story. We were all sitting at a table playing cards while my sister was cleaning. All of a sudden she yelled, "Ouch, you little bastard," because something hit her and she thought I threw it. At this point, I was playing cards with my mom and the others. Still, I was skeptical until the next night when I was forced to believe. I was alone and my family went out. I didn't feel like going, which was a big mistake that I've regretted ever since. Everyone was supposed to return, but they never did that night. I was watching television when something fell in the kitchen. I thought the cat had broken something, so I went in to see what happened, but found nothing broken. But I did see someone run upstairs, thinking someone stayed behind. I followed them, or it. I got to the top of the stairway, but once again, no one was there. I tried to turn on the light, but it didn't work. I decided to walk a little further down the hallway, and then something grabbed me, and I heard a horrible raging scream that sounded like it came from a man. I was really frightened and turned completely white. I tried to turn around, but the flashlight went out. I tapped it in my hands, but it was still broken. I tried to run, but something grabbed a hold of me. It turned me over and started hitting me and clawing at me. Something or someone was attacking me. I covered up my face, but it hurt and I couldn't break free. It had me. Then it pulled me further down the hallway. I was clawing at the floor and hoping I would die right now. Please God, kill me, have mercy on me was all I could think. Somehow, I broke free and ran, but when I got to the steps, it got me back and pushed me down the steps. When I turned over and looked up, all I could see was that there was a shadow over me. I must have fainted. When I came to my mom, a police officer and my sister was standing over me. It seems the neighbor heard me screaming and came over to check. When he found me, I was out cold and my clothes were all torn off. He had taken me back to his place and called the police. They wouldn't believe me. They took it as a simple breaking and entering case. I still dream of the incident. It might sound untrue from your end, but trust me, it happened, and I'll never forget it for the rest of my life. When my grandfather and grandmother were first married, around the early 1900s, they lived on a farm in Kentucky. This farm, it seems, housed more than your normal farm animals. At night, in the attic, you could hear large pieces of furniture being moved back and forth across the floor, very rapidly. Needless to say, they wouldn't bother checking it out until daylight, but when they did, nothing at all was in the attic. It was completely empty. Out back of the house, there was a wood pile where all the wood for the heating and cooking was split and stacked. Very late at night, you could hear someone or something out there chopping wood. The morning's investigation turned up my grandfather's axe in the same exact spot he had left it the day before, and not a single stack of wood out of place. One night, my grandfather felt especially brave. This courage brought on by some homemade moonshine, so when he heard the commotion at the woodpile, he started on the porch and yelled out, "Chop, you SOB, chop!" Well, apparently, the thing heard him, and it began to chop faster and faster to the point where it was chopping at an inhuman rate of speed. My grandfather hightailed it into the house, grabbed his shotgun, and sat up scared out of his wit for the rest of the night. It goes without saying, my grandfather never teased it again while they lived there, which wasn't very long. Only my grandfather and grandmother lived on this farm, and at that time, they had no children nor hired hands working on the farm to account for these very strange happenings. This story still bothers me every day, so I'm going to get to the scary part first. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and I was walking past Tony's house. Tony is very introverted, but a good friend of mine nonetheless. Tony and his family were out of town for the 4th of July weekend, and it was his sister's birthday, so I knew for a fact that nobody was home. Nobody. In fact, I had the keys to his house. His family trusts us. So I was walking back from the night shift at work when I passed by his house. I glanced over at his house, and what I saw made my heart almost stop. I saw a glowing blue figure of a woman, and she was moaning Tony. And I remember distinctly it was a Spanish accent. I jetted home and told my mother about the experience, and of course she thought I was nuts, but even so, she did call their house and got no answer. The following Monday, Tony got back from his trip. I approached him and casually asked, "Who was that old lady in the window Thursday night?" To which he said, "What, are you burnt?" I told him I really saw someone, but when I didn't get any straight answers, I approached his mother and asked her who that old lady in the window Thursday was. But before she answered, my blood ran cold. I glanced over at a picture of an elderly lady, and then I asked his mother, "Who is that lady?" To which his mother replied, "That's my mother. She died years ago, and she had a Spanish accent." I told her that the lady I'd seen last Thursday was her. She was shocked, and she told me that her mother died of a stroke just after she found out her son lost his eye. Thanks for reading. Hey guys and gals, I'm not going to be sexist. It's all about that gender equality. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, guys, I do love all genders, obviously. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for subscribing to me if you haven't subscribed to me yet. I encourage you to comment below and tell me all about these fascinating tales that you believe or don't believe. You have to excuse me, I'm still in story narrating mode, so I try to sound as cool as possible, but that is simply not a possibility because I am not cool. You guys are amazing, and you guys made my channel what it is, but you see, I am a theatrical man, and therefore you have to at least leave me one theatrical comment, dramatic as hell, and positive, because the ad revenue does not care about me. And so, I rely on you guys for my happiness, which works tremendously. Okay guys, don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but please comment, like, and share. I'm just here because I love making this kind of stuff for you guys, and I'm just excited about hitting 4K. I'm just excited about my channel because my channel's pretty, cool, I guess. Well, I don't know. For you guys, it's cool. For me, it can be very cool. But anyway, guys, good night, good morning, and I'll see you in the next video. Love you as always, as I said, because I repeat myself constantly. Bye-bye.